All right. On today's episode, we interviewed Niklas James, where we talked about basically, moving from Norway to the US, right? Getting jobs in that private equity space, and then really shifting focus and starting to go off, doing your first fund and realizing, hey, you know what? Maybe a self-funded deal is maybe better for me than kind of raising money from people. And ultimately buying a home services business and really some of the pros and cons around that space, right? What attracted him to that space? And then ultimately kind of how did he start to grow that business and then where he's at today, which is focused on investing, making LP investments with other searchers and other businesses. So Casey, what was some of your big takeaways?
Getting a chance as somebody from Norway then to join over at Bain at a young age, right? To just Bain Capital, we all know, massive, yep. Right? Mitt Romney, the whole group. And to be a part of that due diligence side, right? And to understand some of those things. But then for that career path inspire you to go out and buy a small to medium-sized business. What it tells you is that you can do very well in this industry. You can make a lot of money on just one good, solid acquisition, right? And, I see these things where, a couple of guys have talked about it just takes one.
Yep.
Right? And that's what's exciting about our space.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I was kind of, surprised that most people wouldn't make that jump, right? If you're in that world, there's a lot of career growth there too. And so kind of he got the exposure to a friend, right? He happened to do an MBA, got that exposure to that space and decided to go into it. And not only went into it, then backed out of it and said, you know what, I'm going to shift this a little bit and go do my own deal, right? And a lot of people, again, don't have that wherewithal. And like we ultimately end up talking about on this podcast, I mean, there's a playbook to execute, but none of it's really that hard, right? A lot of it is very much almost simple things that we all know we need to do, but it's about getting there and executing them and pushing them along and maturing that organization.
Yeah, 100%. This guy's focused. Love Niklas, and he's got a great opportunity for our listeners that might want somebody to participate in one of their investments. So definitely dive in on this podcast. Excellent.
Absolutely, lots of information. So listen in. Hey everybody, it's Feras and would love to see you at our upcoming M&A Launchpad conference in Chicago, October 26th. At a conference, we talk about what it looks like to value a business, how to buy a business, how do you manage a team, right? And ultimately, we're big believers in the buy then build concept. So we're going to have one of our friends, Walker Dybel, the author of Buy Then Build there as well as one of our keynotes and many more. So we'd love to see you there to kind of get exposure to the space and network. Hey, Niklas, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thank you.
Yeah, great to have you today.
All right.
I'm excited to be here.
So you're joining us from what part of the country? You're in Texas, correct?
I live in St. Pete, Florida.
Oh, you live in Florida. Okay.
All right. So maybe for those listeners, I mean, let's just kind of hop right into it, right? What did you previously do right before kind of hopping into where you are today?
Yeah, so my background is, first of all, you'll hear I have an accent. I'm from Norway originally. So I grew up there on the west coast of Norway, where you have your screensaver. That's kind of where I grew up.
I used to work at Microsoft. I know exactly what you're talking about.
That's right. I went to college in London, and then after that, I started my career at Bain Company. At Bain, I was mostly in their private equity due diligence group. So I did a lot of middle market private equity in the Nordics. After Bain, I had a quick stint working in venture capital before I moved to the States, where I did my MBA at HBS. I graduated from there in 2013. I spent a couple of years in corporate America until I got my green card. And then ever since then, I've been in the searcher/sponsor world. So this was late 2015.
All right. So let's dissect that really quick, right? So clearly you kind of came up really that private equity pedigree, right? Not just anybody gets exposure to Bain and to that world. And I guess, you mentioned obviously making the pivot into the searcher space. And my question is ultimately what led you to make that jump, right? Especially kind of with the previous roles you had, right? A lot of people basically double down and start to grow and become a vice president in those ecosystems and, build their career that way. And maybe my question is, how'd you get exposure to that searcher world and what made you decide, you know what, I want to actually hop in and kind of roll my sleeves up and get my hands a little dirty?
Yeah, I found the training that I had from a place like Bain was incredible. And also it gives you a stamp of approval for everything else you do in life. And so that's also super valuable. As far as how did I get into the searcher world, I was exposed to it while at HBS. It wasn't a big thing back in that time period, 2011 to 2013. But there was a small class on it at HBS. I didn't actually take that class, but after we graduated, I had a few classmates who had gone on to become searchers. And that's not so exciting right out of the gate. So when we had our 1 year reunion, there wasn't a whole lot to report back on. But in the year that followed after that, I saw several of them acquire companies. And I went to visit a couple of them and got to see, their new or the facilities and see the small business in operation. And that was super inspiring. I looked at them and essentially thought, if they can do it, I can probably do it too. And from there on, I just had to, as I said, resolve my visa issues before I could jump into the entrepreneurial path.
That's pretty incredible because we love that the Harvard Business School. We like to go up there and go to their ETA conference.
We'll be up there in October. So
yeah, and we go just to be around the ideas and meet cool people and hear good stories and stuff. And it's also good for us to get away from the office and be a part of it. But that's a pretty cool little ecosystem up there and what they've built.
Yeah. But maybe, the funny thing with your story, right? It's almost like the entrepreneur's constant dilemma. It's like, well, if that person can do it, I can definitely do what that person accomplished, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, I guess that gave you the insight of, hey, you know what? Maybe I want to go have my own business, right? And gave you that confidence that you could do it. And so, how'd you progress from there?
Yeah, there was this is a long time ago now, but let me recollect as best I can. There was probably a 6-month period between when I more or less decided that's what I want to do and I actually quit my job. And so that 6-month period I filled with a lot of calling people who were in that world, doing that, just educating myself. And then as I was ramping up my exit from my job, I was traveling around. I took a few holidays here and there to travel and meet prospective investors in Boston and San Francisco and so forth. And I initially raised actually a traditional search fund out of that. So when I quit, that was my intention. So I raised $500,000 or whatever it was in order to have a 2-year runway to cover my costs and have a small salary. But I actually never deposited those checks. So what I did, I went back to them, it must have been like September, October, and I said, look, I really want you guys to be my investors when I find a deal, but I do not want to lock myself into this 2-year track of traditional search funds. First of all, I have optionality around needing that salary because I have a wife who's working and she supported that. And also, I like the idea of being more flexible. I was actually being headhunted for an opportunity at that time that seemed pretty cool. And then I also didn't like the whole aspect of your traditional investors own your deal flow. I wanted to own my deal flow because there's so many ways you can be creative about putting together a deal and structuring it, and also your own economics. So I said to them, I need capital when I'm going to close a deal, but I don't really need it for the search phase itself. So that's how I became a self-funded searcher actually in late 2015, which was a term that wasn't even coined at the time.
Oh, it's funny you say that because whenever we were at one of the events, one of the traditional search funds that funds searchers kind of straight up told us, it's like, hey, don't break the model, right? Because it works very well. The funds can do very well on the searchers, right? But again, to your point, it doesn't always make sense, right? It's not the best economically, or even just being able to get more creative in a deal structure, right? Some funds are not going to accept that. And just being able, what I love about the M&A space is it's all about deal structuring, right? Having done a lot on the real estate side, it's very much one size fits all. Like the boxes are very, very constrained versus the M&A. You can make a deal work in a situation that it may not have worked if you didn't have the ability to get very flexible.
I really agree with that, actually. It's one of the things I often say is that the buy box for a searcher can be pretty big because you can be flexible. The moment you tether yourself to the traditional funds or any kind of institutional partner, your buy box mirrors their buy box. And it's funny they say to you that you shouldn't break the model when in fact it is them who have developed the model in a way where it's pretty narrow. If you go back 15, 20 years in time, these search fund investors, traditional search fund investors, wanted to invest in deals that could give them 3 or 4 times your money. These could be boring old businesses. They could be towing companies. That's the big one, of course, that was such a big success. But over time, they evolved into becoming much more in favor of tech-enabled, very scalable deals that, first of all, are more expensive on the front end. Secondly, they're harder to find and obtain because they're extremely competitive. And thirdly, there's a lot more risk because if a software company doesn't scale, it quickly runs out of steam versus a home service business. It kind of is a little bit more like a steady eddy, but traditional search fund investors don't like steady eddy as much as they used to. So their model evolved, and with that, also the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's very well said. That's because that's how we looked at it. I've read, all the different books and search models, and I did a solo by myself I didn't even know that's what it was. I just bought a company in 2019. I didn't have a definition of it, right? And so as we get kind of further into the world, you start, oh, that's what I did. It was a solo. And, now we're doing kind of an independent sponsor structure, but ultimately we're all just trying to buy a business, and you either syndicate your capital, you have the money, all of these different things. But it's nice for our listeners to hear these different definitions because it's important, right? Because when those guys go out and do a search, traditional search is what you're saying, right? I'm going to go out and I'm going to raise money to get my 2 years to find that business. And if I find that business, and those investors have to really cash call, they put in additional capital to follow on investment, right? But the buy box, if you follow like the Harvard, how to buy a business Harvard book, my God, that's like the perfect business that you have to find. That's what it seems like. It's like it has to hit this exact box. And then when you go out and you say, hey, I don't want to fit just that box, I'm open to anything, you kind of pop out and you become a different type of, you're not really the traditional searcher anymore. Yeah. You're now either a solo searcher or you're an independent sponsor model. Yeah, is that correct? How you kind of see all the verbiage?
Yeah, I still think traditional search is a really good asset class. The institutional investors are still getting very good returns. If you happen to be one of those searchers and you do close a deal, there's a high chance of success because they've been filtered and screened and perfected with the model. So if you actually found something that fits, it's going to probably be a high chance of likelihood of success. But as you see more and more searchers flood into the space, it had to become more flexible in order to absorb all the demand there is, essentially.
And I feel like it's almost disheartening sometimes to go to these events and these people are looking for very specific deals. And, I'm of the opinion, and Casey and I think have a similar thesis to you. We like boring blue collar businesses, right? I want the business that is not going to, give me the chance to 100x my money. I don't need that. Right. Instead, instead of taking, 20% chance to 100x, I'd rather take 75% chance to 4x. Right. And it's just consistent, steady eddy to your point. And so, some of these people really hype. And my background is software. So I came from that ecosystem. I understand what software can do. But some of these guys have very limited, narrow focuses, and they're buying these at 10, 20x premiums that if they did nothing, it's only going to cash flow 5%, cost of capital. It's crazy out there. And so it's interesting, and I understand how the ecosystem and why it kind of consolidated, right, to get to where it is today. But again, I think people just need to really be open-minded, right? Look at other opportunities and, ask yourself, does this risk tolerance make sense for me today, right? Versus what my investors are looking for.
I think I like specialization. So if you're an investor, you can be more savvy if you invest in a narrow area, and you can then become better and you're able to provide more inbound deal flow because you specialize on something. So it makes sense from the investor's perspective. I also like it from the sponsor perspective. As an investor in the space myself now, I love it when a sponsor comes to me and says, hey, I've been doing this for 10 years. This is all I do. It's all I know. And here's another deal that I really like. And this is why I like it. That's very compelling. But if you're a generalist searcher trying to get into this world, yeah, you don't necessarily, the traditional search fund, just to use that as kind of the opposition here, it's a narrow investor. So if you're not aligned with that, then you're probably not going to be a fit for a mutual fit. The world is much bigger than the traditional search. I like what Casey said about how at the end of the day, it's just, someone buying a company. And that's all you do. And then you need to syndicate the capital for that if you don't have it yourself.
Yeah. So then I guess speaking of, Niklas, what was that first deal, right? How'd you come across it? Were you focusing in a niche, or were you just stumbled into something else and you're like, hey, this made sense?
I had a little bit of a journey. My first deal was a software company that I acquired about 18 months after starting my search. It was a small SaaS business with 12 employees, 13 employees, something like that. And I took the reins of that company as CEO. It was in the model of self-funded search. My economics were similar to self-funded search. The deal went a little sideways, so it didn't become the home run we were hoping for, but it was a great learning experience. And one of the good things about it was that it took up a couple of years of my time, but by 2019, I was on to my next project. And my next project then, there were a couple of things I didn't love about SaaS and technology. Even though I had been in VC before, one of the things I decided when I was in VC and why I didn't continue down that path is that I don't have a computer science background. I'm a business guy, and that means you have a lack of control essentially on the product side, because I couldn't even understand, I can understand product roadmap, where we're going, but I have no understanding on how we're going to get there, how fast it'll go, or how we can improve that process. And so just didn't feel like a great fit for me. So for various reasons, as a sponsor, I decided to go back to businesses that are a little more intuitive to understand. And specifically at that time, my wife was working at Lennox International in Texas, which is a big manufacturing company that manufactures HVAC equipment. So she kind of had a front row seat to this industry from a OEM perspective, and I saw service side of that business that is highly fragmented and not very sophisticated. This was before COVID, so private equity hadn't yet jumped all over home service.
Yep.
And so I took an interest in that, and then started to connect with business owners in the HVAC space specifically, and eventually closed a deal in 2019, 2020 in the home services space, which is a deal that I still oversee as an independent sponsor.
Awesome.
Very exciting.
Yeah, so it sounds like, first one went up to bat, didn't really quite work out, and dusted yourself off and went into the next one. And so I think a lot of people, you have to realize there is a lot of learning that happens across the board, right? And I tell people, don't get analysis paralysis to where you give yourself a million reasons to say no and you never do a deal, right? It's about going into a deal knowing enough to where once you hit other roadblocks, you have the wherewithal to solve them and keep moving forward, right? And ultimately build this Rolodex and this archive of information and knowledge, right? So that way, even if it doesn't work on the first one, the next one, you are that much further ahead in life, in the business.
So I'm sure we all have conversations with our wives, right? They seem to be our sounding boards, even though they may not be the best ones, but sometimes they give it. So I was literally having this conversation with my wife like 5 days ago, and we're working on would be my third acquisition, but it'd be our second acquisition here at Equity Launchpad. And I was telling her, I was like, hey, these are all the things that I wish I would have done on our last acquisition. And she's like, well, hold on. Do you really know what you're doing? And I was like, well, I think I do, but I'm still learning at every deal. Like I made some mistakes in this deal that I now trying to cover up in the next deal. And I'm talking about on the negotiations, right? On how I papered it or asking. I mean, on this current deal that we're looking at, we asked for the entire seller carry to be deferred 12 months. Well, the broker's like, we've never seen that before. I'm like, well, I know that first 12 months is so important on cash flow. We're buying a very cash flow centric business that I need to ask for that. Yeah. Would have been a heck of a thing to ask for in the first deal. It's like you learn these things. And sometimes, if you're not always learning and looking back and reflecting on these businesses going like, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? How else do we get better at the game?
Absolutely. I mean, and I was coincidentally just prior to this podcast, I was, in a room and talking to our managers and, really talking about how we got from there to here is different, how we get from here to there. Right. And I'm giving a presentation in a couple of weeks and it's titled How to Go from 0 to 200 Employees. Right. And what that looks like. And every step of the way a 5-person company functions is very different than a 10, than a 50, than 100, and there's a lot of learnings. And again, you continue to evolve, and the people that succeed are the people that keep those lessons, that are probably hard learned and apply them to the next one to get them further ahead. And so I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what you said there about being in the game, that's the key. You learn by doing, and you can listen to podcasts and absorb some nuggets here and there, and it can be inspirational. But to truly learn, you need to be out there and do it. And so that would be my biggest recommendation.
Or you go buy a home services company, you call Niklas and say, hey, come invest in this, but make sure I don't make any of these mistakes, right?
Yeah.
You bring in partners too.
That's right. That's right.
So then I guess to maybe tie that off, so you found the company, you bought it, right? I think you self-funded the whole thing, right? What were the kind of the low-hanging fruit that you saw that you immediately started to address? And, what were the results that you saw from that?
Yeah, talking about the home services business now. So I approached that not like a searcher, but as an independent sponsor. I think as a sponsor, the big difference between the two models is that your intention is not necessarily to be the CEO. Your intention is to be the strategic governance who oversees the deal and make sure that there is good management in place and make sure that you're doing the right things to improve the asset overall. And so in our case, the seller has remained as the CEO. He's done a fantastic job, as he also did before we recapped him, and he rolled quite a bit of equity. So there is a skin in the game for him as well, an upside as we perform well. What were the low-hanging fruits? This was a business that I think was not very strong yet on back office. So meaning accounting, organization, marketing, and HR. And as a sponsor, I've been extremely hands-on in developing all of those departments. I think also there was no M&A outlook, being a family-owned, family entrepreneur situation. The way they approach M&A, they don't have the same access to capital or know-how on how to execute on that. So we developed a playbook both around how to build out the organic growth and the M&A. So we've done a lot of add-on acquisitions. I don't know if these were low-hanging fruits, but we have taken what was a well-performing but not very sophisticated business to now being a well-performing, pretty sophisticated business that as we enter kind of over the next 2 years, our own exit territory, a bigger buyer than us will come and look at it and say, yeah, it checks all the boxes. That's why we are willing to pay a higher multiple, because not only has it grown in EBITDA, but also it's become a more secure and safe and reliable asset that does all of these things.
Yeah. And maybe can you share with the listeners just, what numbers, what size you're talking about? How many employees was it? Maybe revenues or multiples, whatever you're comfortable sharing. And then where has it gone to today?
Yeah, when I first came across the business, it was 18, 19 million of revenue, roughly 10% EBITDA. And today we've surpassed 50 million, so we're in the low 50 millions on revenue now. A lot of that has been organic. Some of it has been M&A as well. And EBITDA-wise, our margins are roughly the same as they were in the beginning. I wish they were a little bit higher, so we're trying to address that before we probably go to market. But we're very happy about it. We invested a lot for growth, and the market was very much in our favor in 2021 and 2022. Sure. We sell home services, right? So homeowners were sitting at home. They had a lot of cash. They wanted to upgrade their homes. A lot of people were transitioning into new homes and thereby upgrading them before they moved in. So there was like a artificially much demand for home services for a little while there. 2023, 2024 have not been quite as exuberant, but still steady markets. That's the whole premise of home services, that it's mission critical. But it's gone from being a market growth situation where the rising tide lifts every boat up to being more of a, how can we be better than our competitors? How can we have operational excellence that make us more lean and efficient and help us steal market share? And I think that's, in a way, a healthy dynamic too, because we are improving the business enormously by becoming better than our competitors, which in the early years, we could focus a lot on how do we do more marketing, spend more on that? How can we buy companies? Because every company we buy is successful. How can we hire more salespeople? Because they're going to go out there and every lead is converting. Versus now, it's much more about training, data, and being consistent in our approach. So how can we get all the technicians to the same level, all the salespeople to the same level, and really trying to be a more robust operation. So as the sponsor sitting on top of this, it's been a phenomenal journey. We talked about learning as you're doing. I mean, imagine all the learning through this 4 years we've been through now, where we have had a good market, a softer market, and everything you need to learn in between with M&A activity and organic growth. It's been it's so much fun every day. And for me, when I started on the entrepreneurial journey, the top goal I had, much more than financial, was I want to have fun every day. I want to
good goal.
be energized I want to be energized when I sit down at my desk. And that has been 100% true since the beginning. Just having a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So just before we jump into talking about your new capital venture that you guys are a part of, now, did some of these playbooks come from Bain? Would you say that, these playbooks that you've came up with over time, did that those early years in private equity, were you able to pull from those to really think about these playbooks? Or did you, stumble across EOS? Or did you or are you just constantly kind of jiggering your own systems and programs?
I've never had that question before. I was in Bain Company, which is more on the consulting side than the direct investing side, but we would do the due diligence. So I think a lot of the mindset that we had there where, I screen things first for what's the downside protection? And then secondly, can I believe in the upside potential? And then lastly, what is our value creation plan? I think that approach still persists with me today. The methodology and capacity you get for working is still there. But of course, I've learned a lot in the last 10, 15 years since then.
Sure.
So it's a little hard to explicitly say this and that is from my Bain time. I forget the second part of your question.
No, it's just about where your playbooks, like, were these things that you created yourself, or are these things that you kind of taken through different things like using Traction or EOS or any of these programs that are out there?
I love EOS. I haven't applied it myself necessarily in a disciplined fashion, but I'm a big fan of it. I've heard many success stories. And I think what you're doing when you sign up for any such system is that you're taking something that is proven and you are enhancing accountability around what you're doing. And you're also covering all your bases, right? It's a comprehensive system where if you follow the plan, there shouldn't be any big gaps in how you operate your company. And I think that's as much the key as the particular system around EOS. It's that you're covering all the bases and you're holding people, including yourself, accountable for progress.
Maybe to fast forward, so what are you focused on today?
Yeah, still focused on ServiceStar, our home services platform. I'm the chairman, so I oversee that company still today. And we're still having a good time. We are 4 years in. The average hold period for a sponsor deal is 5.5 years. So we're starting to position ourselves for that. As a sponsor, in partnership with another sponsor, I'm hoping to close another deal here in 4 or 5 weeks' time that I'm very excited about, based in Texas. I'll tell you more about it after we close.
Cool.
And then over the years, as I've been in the ecosystem for a long time, I've also invested in friends and other sponsors and had good success with that and learn a lot. You can learn a lot by doing, but you also learn a lot by investing. When you put your money somewhere, you pay attention to it. And that's been a good journey, which in the last 6 to 12 months, we have institutionalized with the formation of Minds Capital. And Minds Capital is a investment firm. We provide equity investments to independent sponsor-led and searcher-led acquisitions. And we are a minority equity investor in the deals that we invest in.
All right. And then maybe is there a buy box that you're looking for, or is it pretty broad given kind of, you have partners in different areas?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think our specialty is connecting with sponsors, understanding their pain points, understanding that they like to syndicate the capital from a pool of investors as opposed to finding a unitranche player who then assumes control. So we like to back the best horses, and that's what we specialize on doing. And our buy box, therefore, largely mirrors that of these horses, so to speak. And so if a good sponsor is out there and they find a deal that they think is bankable and financeable, yes, we'll take a look. But we're not necessarily industry focused, at least not at this time.
All right. Unless you have a sideways, SaaS business, maybe that one you'll rule out. Awesome. Okay. And then I guess maybe, have you guys done a deal in that yet? Or are you guys still out there looking for sponsors? And on that same vein, how, if a sponsor is interested in maybe, getting you guys to take a look, how can they reach out?
Yes, we have actively started deploying that fund. We started here in Q2 deploying. We've made 7 commitments so far. 2 have closed, 5 are pending. I think one of them, I'm not totally sure we'll get there. But anyway, our deployment pace is roughly 1 deal per month, maybe slightly more. And people can get in touch with me either by finding me on LinkedIn or sending me an email to nj for Niklas James at mindscapital.co.
Outstanding.
Perfect.
All right. Well, let's jump into our rocket round. We want to learn a little bit more about you, Niklas. Here we go.
All right. So first question, what do you like to do in your free time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in Florida. We have 3 young kids, 6, 3, and less than 1. And they keep us pretty busy. So free time definitely means something else than it used to 10 years ago. But some of our favorite activities with them is to go biking or go swimming, and just really trying to make the most of living here in Florida. In the summers, when it's too hot to be in Florida, we like to go back to Norway. So we just had a couple of months there this summer, which was amazing. A lot of friends and family time and beautiful scenery. And just hanging out over there. So that's my life right now. It's work oriented and then 3 kids at home.
Well, that's where as a parent, alone or personal time is whenever you go on a trip for work and you have that evening at the hotel. You're doing the business dinner and you got to have 2-3 hours to yourself. So we all know how that goes.
All right. Next question. So what's your most memorable moment in your business journey?
It's hard not to think back on the big milestones. And I've made a habit out of buying a pot every time I have a major milestone. So this can be, of course, closing a deal. It can be exiting a deal, or it can be a resolution of a major issue. And so closing the deals that I told you about definitely were big milestones. There have been some, business issues, both positive and negative. You want to recruit someone or you want to resolve a legal issue that is pending. Some of these qualify as big enough for me to buy a pot, and then I put it right there in our living room, and each of them is a story for me. And I buy kind of nice pots from places I've been a tourist, so that they become memories both of the milestone and of the trip.
Got it. So to make sure I understand, it's pot, P-O-T, right?
Yeah, like a clay pot. So the first one I bought was a pot by the Navajo Americans in New Mexico. We got married in New Mexico. It's where my in-laws live, and they paint these really beautiful hand-painted pots. So I bought one of those, and it's not cheap. It's $1,200 to buy a small pot.
That's a really expensive pot. Do not have the kids break that one.
Yeah, the kids break
that's right. It's on the top shelf. So yeah, and then I put inside it. I put a little note that it's here's the milestone that I celebrated with that particular one. Awesome. And then I just kept doing this. So I have one from Norway and one from Greece and one from Peru. But yeah, so they're beautiful on the shelf and nice memories of the various milestones. But I would love to say it's the small everyday things that you remember 5 years later, but it truly is the big milestones that you celebrate and make a big difference that stand out when you think about your journey.
Awesome. All right. And last but not least, what's your favorite tool or resource?
Can I mention 3?
Go for it.
First of all, I would mention LinkedIn. I've actually evolved into viewing LinkedIn as a very powerful marketing tool. So for me, it's a great way to both keep in touch with a lot of people and have reached the people I don't yet know. And to some extent, it generates opportunities like investor flow or deal flow, which has been favorable. So that's a cool tool. And I think a lot of people are too shy to use it. A second tool would be ChatGPT. I find I'm still underutilizing it. I think most of us are. It's an incredible tool in so many different ways. And lastly, I would say my CRM, where I track all the deals I look at and also have a contact management system. I'm in that CRM all day, every day, and it just keeps me on track. Very happy about it.
No, absolutely. If someone's listening to this and you don't have a CRM, you are behind on life, and you really need to step it up. After this, get better at it. After this, trust me, Niklas, we're putting you in the CRM with some key things, especially where you're located. Because I'm really trying to build the habit of, I do a lot of traveling, and if I go to a city, I want to be able to see, hey, who are the people there that I want to catch up with, go meet, or if people, maybe I did an interview and I haven't met them face to face. And so CRM is definitely one of those 101 things that people need to get on top of.
I'd love that.
Awesome. Well, Niklas, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Lots of information.
Incredible information. Thank you.
And so we'll go ahead and, we'll include all the contact information in the show notes, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the M&A Launchpad Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast and would like to support us, please leave us a rating and a review after you listen. I'm Casey Minshew, and I look forward to talking with you next week.